Thank you very much, Professor Delmer. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I give the organizers my best congratulations on the 10th anniversary. Without further ado, let me give you what I found in Professor Huntington's book at the end. He said, "The futures of both peace and civilization depend on understanding and cooperation among the political, spiritual, and intellectual leaders of the world's major civilizations." And I have a hunch that just understanding and cooperation may not be enough to ensure a good future for us. It is quite possible that we may understand each other very well, we may even cooperate, but our different perspectives may remain, get entrenched, and become irreconcilable. The step taken from irreconcilable differences is pivotal. It can help us to ensure a good future for us if that step is taken with a bent for progressiveness. The word I coined is getting very difficult for me myself. So within the framework of the International Law of Co-progressiveness, here I will highlight the framework of this law of this International Law of Co-progressiveness, and then I will explore the role of civilizations within this framework. After the end of the Cold War, there were some efforts to characterize the nature of international society and international law. Just as there are many ways of seeing the world, there are as many ways of seeing international law. In a paper published in 2001, I chose to focus on and highlight the spirit of international law at a particular moment or period of time, as that spirit is exhibited in the component parts of the system, its subject, its formation, its content, and its enforcement, and other aspects. The leitmotif of international law was coexistence at the height of the Cold War, cooperation during the period of détente, and is now co-progressiveness in the post-Cold War era. As there was no pre-existing word that followed perfectly from coexistence and cooperation, I had to coin the phrase, co-progressiveness. By the word of co-progressiveness, it is meant a society that is all-encompassing, hence co, preoccupied with advancement in moral and ethical terms more than in other aspects, and having human flourishing as its ultimate goal, hence progressiveness. Of course, the leitmotif in each period is not the only theme audible to us. In coexistence, there was cooperation. Coexistence was the background note to cooperation, and coexistence and cooperation are the background notes to co-progressiveness. The international existence was propounded most beautifully by the distinguished Russian scholar, Professor Tunkin. I'm sure many of you know about him. That law treats primarily states as its subject. Its formation depends primarily on the customary international law formation process. Its content concerns itself mostly with the separate existence and the resulting coexistence of states. Its enforcement depends on the separate, uncoordinated action by states, such as countermeasures. The international law of cooperation begins to include more subjects or participants, such as individuals, at least for some purposes. Its formation is also helped by a great variety of non-traditional forms of law, such as gentlemen's agreements and declarations, or soft law, etc., etc. Its content primarily concerns itself promoting détente and cooperation between states and with mutual benefit. The cooperative spirit made it possible for several grand concepts to be formulated during the period of détente. Its enforcement is often characterized by a sort of membership sanction, so that the community simply excludes non-performing states from the community, and therefore the benefits deriving from membership. The international law of co-progressiveness is even more inclusive. It is all-encompassing as far as the subjects or participants are concerned, so that individuals and even non-governmental organizations have become such subjects or participants, if not yet to the full extent. The formation of the law is improved by the participation of these new players and the innovative resort to the resolutions of the Security Council for the establishment of international criminal tribunals. The content of the law is preoccupied with advancement in moral and ethical terms more than in other respects, and having as its ultimate goal human flourishing to the fullest extent, so that each individual is able and willing to realize his or her own worthwhile pursuit. This is reflected in the various further concretization of grand norms and the conclusion of a large number of agreements. The enforcement of the law takes center stage and is characterized more and more by a sort of image sanction by which the state and the international community resort to the public shaming of a violator of the law in order to induce it to come back to the road of law compliance. The ultimate goal of this law, just like that of any society, is human flourishing. By human flourishing is meant the situation where an individual lives his or her life driven by a worthy project, goal, or value. This orientation moved me to be dissatisfied with the normal ideas of negative liberty or positive liberty. I propose that we consider the role of induced liberty in the sense that efforts to seek meaning do not result from any innate quality of the atomic individual, but are induced by the community, its culture and history, and that without a state, the individual would not have thought about many choices. From this perspective, strong states are essential to human flourishing. Of course, this picture of the international law of co-progressiveness was not completely blemish-free. There are still a lot of problems in the various parts of the system, but the overall tenor of this law is progressiveness. As a result of these blemishes or problems, when I was working on the coining of phrases, I was content with the calmer phrase of progressive or progressiveness as compared to other phrases such as liberalness or democracy. Now, within this framework of international law as described above, where can we fit civilizations? What role can civilizations play? One possibility would be for civilization to occupy the same place as a state and play the same role. However, this possibility probably will not work. As we know, states as the main subjects of international law are special because they are the organizing units of the world. The world is too big. In order to make sense of it and to manage it, we have to divide it up in some manageable units. By historical accident, I'm sorry to say, states are now those units. Civilizations, as we can observe currently, cannot be those units. First of all, usually civilizations imagine themselves as being a kind of universality or capable of being so. As such, a civilization is not an organizing unit, but is a whole world in itself. Secondly, civilizations do not have a spatial dimension. You know, with states we have territory and many things, right? While this spatial dimension is necessary for a unit, whatever unit, to become an organizing unit of the world. Thirdly, the existing example of the Holy See acting as a subject of international law shows how difficult it is for a civilization to be such a subject. Sometimes the Holy See will enjoy all the rights it can claim, but when it was taken to court in the United States as such a subject, it argues that no, churches and the priests are responsible. A second possibility would be for civilizations to take the place as a special subject or participant in the system, similar to that of an NGO, and plays a special role so as to promote certain positions, hoping to influence the decision-making of the main subjects of international law. In this role, a civilization may have a strong impact in many fields and may become a strong special promoter of the co-progressiveness of international society and human flourishing. Now, as a strong special promoter of the co-progressiveness of international society, a civilization will have to struggle with some problems in order for that role to be effective. First of all, a civilization has itself to be a progressive one. If not, then that civilization may run the risk of being considered not practicing what it preaches, and its effectiveness will suffer substantially. How such a civilization becomes progressive is a difficult question. Usually, it is internally driven. Internally driven progress also lasts long. Of course, it can also be externally induced, just as personal liberty can be. But worse yet, it can also be externally coerced. How such a situation is evaluated, I will leave for another day. Secondly, a civilization must be able to manage its inter-civilizational relations with others in a satisfactory manner so that all civilizations become co-progressive. Of course, this is the most difficult question, and there is no silver bullet to solve this problem. Assuming that between civilizations, there should never be any malice or intentional harm, and that inclusiveness is a virtue, I offer additional tools here. First, a two-man mindedness attitude when taking action. Second, a Thomas Henry Sanderson lens when perceiving a disadvantage. And third, benign competition between civilizations. And I will explain these one by one. First, the two-man mindedness attitude. This attitude was given a chance to find a place in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, but did not make it there because probably of the Tower of Babel. Marianne Glendon related this to us in her book on the drafting of the Universal Declaration. During the drafting process, the working group added to Rene Cassin's draft preamble the sentence that all men are brothers. Being endowed with reason and members of one family, they are free and equal in dignity and right. Then, the Confucianist that participated in the drafting, Mr. P.C. Chan, suggested that besides naming reason as an essential human attribute, the article ought to include another concept. What he had in mind, he said, was a Chinese word that in literal translation meant two-man mindedness, but which might be expressed in English as sympathy or consciousness of one's fellow man. That word was 人, a composite of two characters, one for men and another for two. A word emblematic of an entire worldview and way of life, 人 has no precise counterpart in English. To Cassin, it would surely have evoked Rousseau's notion of compassion, but that word, too, fell short of the mark. Chan's suggestion was accepted, but his idea was rendered overtly by adding the word and conscience after reason. If individuals adopt such an attitude of two-man mindedness, probably there would not have been those insulting cartoons or movies that we have been talking about. Of course, there would not be those terrible aftermath stories either. If a civilization adopts such an attitude, there will be fewer occasions for tension or worse. Second, the Thomas Henry Sanderson lens. Probably you may not have been studying the history of British Empire, but when the British Empire was presented with a very strong challenger, and any advantage for that challenger was considered a disadvantage for the empire. Mr. Crow, a Korea Foreign Office official, wrote the famous Crow Memorandum, lasting 23 pages, perceiving a titanic struggle between the two and counseling hard-nosed containment. However, that view was challenged by a Mr. Thomas Henry Sanderson, another official in the Foreign Office. He wrote, "It has sometimes seemed to me, to a foreigner reading our press, the British Empire must appear in the light of some huge giant sprawling over the globe with gouty fingers and toes, stretching in every direction. which cannot be approached without eliciting a scream. The essence of Mr. Sanderson's lens is that things are not necessarily that bad, and taking a more relaxed attitude may help to put things in perspective and promoting better decision-making. Third, benign competition. Clash of civilization is something that we should try our hardest to avoid. Benign competition, however, may be something beneficial to all the civilizations. This may serve as an external inducement towards co-progressiveness. In reality of life, such benign competition is also unavoidable, as much as we may try not to see it. How such competition can be done or even promoted is a tough question, particularly if we accept that each civilization is of equal worth. From such a point of departure, civilizations probably should not compete on any alleged criteria of intrinsic worth. Several years ago, I considered the issue of interstate competition. I argued that from the starting point of equality of states, the irreducible minimum being equal juridical status in terms of dignity and position, and territorial integrity and political independence. And under the basic condition of respecting this irreducible minimum of equality of states, a state that has managed to become strong legitimately on a set of difference arguments is a strong state. A state is a great state if it has legitimately become strong and has achieved the big power status and has paid due respect to the value of and shouldered with substantial success the hefty responsibility towards the international system. A state is a leader state if it has respected the value of and shouldered with success substantial responsibility toward the international system, has not only been making good faith efforts or even exemplary efforts to comply with existing legitimate rules, but also, more importantly, has helped to formulate or refine a proper vision of the international system and to build it up so that the flourishing of humanity can be achieved to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, this framework cannot be applied straightforwardly to intercivilizational competition, but probably we can do a kind of dépassage by taking respect for state territorial integrity and political independence and contribution to the international system and human flourishing as the criteria for benign competition between civilizations. This way, we can avoid making a judgment on the inherent worth of a civilization, but can make an assessment on the basis of what it does in international relations. These are my remarks, more or less on a very much impressionistic basis and under the strong influence of jet lag. I'm sorry to let you know. I do hope, however, they can provoke further consideration of the issues that I have dealt with. Furthermore, I hope that each civilization and all the main civilizations as a whole may improve its organizational operations to study and promote the co-progressiveness of civilizations and of international society as a whole, in addition to holding dialogues. After all, what's the point of having dialogues? In my view, dialogue is supposed to be for the progressiveness of society. For example, there are so many academies in the world. Why don't we have an academy for civilizations so that the skills to promote the progressiveness of every civilization and international society as a whole can be studied and honed and improved upon? Also, in the world, we have a Security Council. Why don't we have a civilizational council? If we have one, perhaps when the fires are going on after the insulting movies, an interesting statement from such a council perhaps could help alleviate some tensions. In any event, I hope the organizers of this forum may take some concrete steps in this direction now that the 10th anniversary of the forum is being celebrated, and of course, my hearty congratulations. Thank you.